Sorry, I'm looking haggard. Haven't slept properly in about a week. So, yeah, bear with me if I ramble a lot today. Because jam reffing, I can ramble a lot because I really enjoy it. For those that don't know me, I'm Beard. I was formerly head ref of Liverpool Rollerbirds. I've recently stepped away from that. I'm going to be trying out for a new league soon enough. But been reffing 9 years now. Take away 2 for COVID, of course. Ref nearly 400 games. Done about 150 as jam ref, which is relevant to this call, I suppose. So yeah, it's my most experienced position. I'm not the best jam ref in the world. I like, especially coming back from injury, I'm still not back to where I was, but like to think I'm a pretty decent jam ref at least. I'm going to be talking about today, like what I do as best practice for jam refs, and the basics of it as well, like how to score points and that sort of thing. It's going to be pretty basic stuff. If you want me to go into more advanced stuff, we can do, but I don't really want to overwhelm people, if I'm going to be honest. So I have made some notes, so bear with me. If my dog doesn't try to eat them anyway. So jam reffing then. As I was chatting with Lee, it's the position that I think that new refs should start out with. It's purely because it's the most focused position, in my opinion, because you are concentrating on your jammer, what they do, and what happens to them. Unlike the rest of the referee positions, you have to think about a lot more things, and you have to widen your field of view, as it were. But as jam ref, you are literally focusing on that one person and what's happening to them and what they do. I'm going to talk about what I do as what I believe is good practice and what has helped me improve as a jam ref. So not everyone has to do these things as good practice, but I think personally that you should do them. But again, you don't have to. So starting with before a game starts, work out who your scorekeeper is going to be, first of all. With the other jam ref, work out which one of you is the more experienced jam ref. If you're the less experienced jam ref, take the more experienced scorekeeper, because an experienced scorekeeper can make your life so much easier, especially if you're not as experienced as a jam ref. When you've worked out who your scorekeeper is, work out what your hand signals are going to be for your points, because everyone does points differently. And it's really useful to be able to get that right with your scorekeeper, because they need to know how many points you're awarding. Also, just communicate with them, like when you're going to be telling them your points and everything like that you're dropping off. Things like star passes, what your signal is going to be for like that. I know there is a standardized signal of like the whole like thing like that, but it's useful to make sure that they know what you're going to be signaling to them at the end of the day. Also, when you're talking to your scorekeeper, get an identifier so you can identify which team you're supposed to be jam reffing. I know that sounds like really like simple stuff, but you need something on your wrist that shows which team you are jam reffing. And it's helpful if your scorekeeper's got that identifier on their wrist, same color identifier on their wrist as well, because then the teams know which scorekeeper's holding up the points to refer, so you can refer back to that. Before the jam as well, speak to the OPRs. Speak to them, see what information you want to get from them in a jam. It can be a bit overwhelming to be looking for information from the OPRs at the same time when you're jam reffing, but it is useful. When I say speak to them about what you want in terms of nodding, in terms of like if they can tell you about how many skaters a jam has passed at the end of a jam if you can't quite see it because they're on the outside of the pack, that sort of thing really. There's various little hand signals that they can give to help you out as well that you can ask them to do, like the whole like patting your helmet is commonly used for the jammers calling it. If you see that, it doesn't mean you have to call it. It basically means you have to adjust your position so you can see the jammer calling it. Because at the end of the day, if the OPR can be doing this all day long, but the jammer might not be lead, for example, and you don't want to get into the mistake of accidentally calling a jam when your jammer's not lead. So yeah, speak to the OPRs and see if they can do that hand signal for you as well. It's just really useful. Also, before the game starts, speak to your other jam ref. Speak to them about how you're going to avoid each other, how you're going to line up at the start of the jams. Most common thing I speak to my other jam ref is if the other jammer's being recycled, you want to know where you want to be. Personally, I prefer going on the inside line if my jammer's going helpful ever and the other jammer's being recycled. But that's a personal choice, and you can discuss that with the other jam refs, though.
On the same theme, you should have the same discussion with your front IPR as well, I think.
Yeah,
just to get it clear and out in the open which way you're expecting them to go, so there's no confusion.
Yeah, agreed. And at the end of the day, the jam refs have priority because they're going to be going fastest and going out the pack. The IPR needs to get out your way, quite frankly. If they're not getting out your way, move them, because you have got that priority there. Sorry.
Is it right? I think I've been told that the jam refs usually take the line closest to the track and the pack refs stay behind. Yeah, exactly it. Because you basically need to be able to see the jammer and have the most access to them, and you need to be on the inside line for that. With your other jam ref as well, one thing that you take into account with positioning as well, who's taller? Because at the end of the day, if you've got someone like me who's 6 foot-ish, don't know, I've been ages since I measured myself, and then you've got someone that's like 5'6", it's not going to be useful for me to be standing in front of them. So I would line up behind them so I could see over their head basically and kind of move around a little bit, because it's just going to be easier for them more than anything, rather than them trying to see around me because I'm a little bit wider perhaps and that sort of thing.
I kind of picture Razor and Julius together.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good example. Julius is like 6'7", I think, and Razor is literally about 5'4". So Razor doesn't jam ref very often, but I'd imagine if Razor and Julius did jam ref, Razor would go at the front, nearest the line. Jules would go behind her. So take like a foot back sort of thing, so he can see over her quite clearly. And that's a really good example. Thank you. Me and my other jam ref at a recent scrimmage, I was a lot more agile than he was. So we kind of agreed that he'd stay still and I'd avoid him rather than us both trying to avoid each other, just because I had the extra agility there. Yeah, and that's completely fine. But if you work that out before, that's why you speak to the other jam ref before the game starts. So you can work that out. It's not, what I'm saying isn't always have to be the case. That's a perfect example of when perhaps someone that is taller than you would take the front line, for example, and you can go behind them or avoid them, as you're saying. It's all about what you two as jam refs prefer. But what the point Lee was making about the IPRs, though, they just need to get out of your way, regardless of how agile you are. They should be out away from the line, from the track boundaries, so you can get past them basically and see where your jammer is. Yeah, and Invader Sin makes perfectly good point there. Yeah, as IPR, I will tell my jam refs, if I'm in your way, move me. Best example of that is a game over in the States I did. My IPR didn't move out of my way and I just shoulder barged them. They went flying, and I said sorry to them after the jam, and they were like, "No, my fault. Shouldn't go in your way." And I literally sent them flying. I haven't blocked anyone in a very long time, but somehow I managed to send someone flying.
And the reverse is also true. I consensually manhandle jammer refs who are in my way, in my zone, and in my track if I'm rear inside pack ref and they are like 2 meters out.
Move them
they need to be close
because
just like we said that jammer refs need to be close to the line to see the action. Well, pack refs need to be 2 foot back to see what they need to be able to see.
And yes, consensual touching, fine, but generally I'd be very wary about touching a jam ref because they tend to be where they need to be. But if I would rather say to them, just move into the inner line a little bit rather than pushing them, because they could put that pushing a jam ref when they're about to go shooting off could put them severely off balance. And even if you do it gently, that could put someone out. So I would just be careful with that. But that's me personally anyway.
Or worse still, push them into the action. I've
never seen that happen. I've seen refs get onto the track many times. Done it myself.
Let's be clear about this. This is after feedback and after consent, and I'm not talking about block it. So I'm not a monster, you guys.
I don't know. I've met you, Lee.
Wow.
We've all seen the gif of you skating across the
the God.
That needs to be resurrected. So anyway, moving on from before the jam, at the start of a jam, how do you line up? I would line up in line with my jammer, because you need to be seeing where they're going and you need to be in line with them to do that. In terms of, I would hold the hand that's got the identifier out to the jammer, and make eye contact with them so they know you're their jam ref. I would line up with a whistle in my mouth. So as jam ref, I normally have two whistles, one on my fingers and one around my neck. I have the one around my neck in my mouth at the start of a jam, and I keep it there. And blah, 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 blah. So I've written a lot of notes here just to make sure I get things. With the whistle in your mouth, keep it there, so you know that the jammer could get lead or has lead. I only remove the whistle from my mouth, to make a call, or if that jammer cannot get lead. So if the other jammer gets lead, or if they get a penalty, or if they remove the helmet cover, or if a teammate removes the helmet cover, then they can no longer get lead. So I drop that whistle from my mouth. But otherwise, I just keep it in there, because the reason being, once they've got lead, if they need to call it off quickly, you're don't want to be fumbling around for your whistle. So just keep it in your mouth. Where were we? Also, I find it useful at the start of a jam or in prospective passes as well, or potential passes, to know whether a jammer is still on their initial pass. Various ways of doing that, and it varies from person to person. I tend to keep like a thumb in my pocket if I've got pockets. Not everyone does, obviously. But find a way to know when your jammer is still on their initial pass. If you've got a good scorekeeper, they can tell you in case you forget, but you can't always rely on them for that. So just figure out a way for yourself. Because if the jammer goes to the box on their initial pass, you need to remember that they're coming out on their initial pass as well.
There's a thing I quite like to do if they're not on their initial and go to the box, is that my no initial signal, which is like the swan shaking its head. I tend to hold that behind my back as if it's points, but with the wrong hand. So then I know straight away if the jam ends, just to throw that in the air. If I come out of the box with that, then I know they're on their initial.
And that's another great way of doing it. It's not how I do it myself, but there's no definitive way of doing it. And if that works for you, great. Sorry, is that Dino that said that?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I thought I recognised your voice. Yeah, and it's a good way of doing it if it works for you, and if it works for anyone else, do that by all means. Don't have to do my like thumb in pocket type things. Just whatever works for you at the end of the day. So as long as you know they are still on their initial. Where are we? So, your main roles as a jam ref once the actual jam starts. Following your jammer. I know it sounds really simple, but you need to be in line with your jammer most of the time. Reason why I say most of the time is when they're approaching the pack or the rearmost blocker, I tend to drop back a couple of feet just so I can watch them initiating onto the back of the pack, watching for back blocks and multiplayers and that sort of thing. But once they're actually engaging, you need to be in line with them so you can see how and when they're passing people. And the most accurate way to do that is to be in line with them. When I say passing people, it's hips. That everything's measured by there. So your jammer's hips, passing, and another skater's hips. I know that sounds like a really obvious thing for everyone that's been in Derby a while, but when I started out many years ago, I used to think it was skates that people had to pass their skates past someone else. No. It's hips. So following the jammer, that's the first priority. Next thing is calling lead or calling not lead. You need to be pretty shit hot on doing that, because if you don't do it in time, there could be potential for mix-ups with the other jam ref calling lead when they shouldn't be. So that's your next priority. And also calling it off as well. Jammers, things that get annoyed, and teams in general, one of the things that they can get annoyed about most is if a jam ref's not calling the jam in time. Sorry, people are making comments. Yeah, Mark's made a good point there that you can rely on your rear IPR and rear OPR, and if you're confident in them doing that, yeah, stay in line with your jammer by all means. From there, as I say, the call-offs and next priority. Next thing from there, points at the end of the day. You need to be able to give the accurate points, because, again, teams and jammers aren't going to be happy if you aren't giving accurate points. They might think they've got more points than you're actually going to give, but you need to be in line with them so you can do that as accurately as possible. I'm just going through all my notes here. From there, after your points and passes, your next priority is penalties, in my opinion. And you only need to really be looking for penalties by your jammer or to your jammer. If it's by your jammer, in an ideal world, you should be first to call it. You're not always going to be first to call it. Yes, Lauren, I can give copies of my notes once I've typed them up properly, by the way, because I'm currently rambling a lot at the moment and my notes are all over the place. Sorry, where was I? Sorry, getting distracted. Yeah, penalties. If you haven't got time to call a penalty, if it's by a blocker, because your jammer's shot off, drop it off with the IPRs, normally the front one, but with the rear one as well. If you've got time to do that, it can be a matter. If you don't have time to look for that blocker's number, you can literally go, for example, purple helmet, back block, something that's identifying the skater, but it has to be something that's unique to that skater. If you haven't got time to do that, or you don't have an identifying thing, you don't know their number, it can wait until the next pass. Not ideal, but at the end of the day, as long as the penalty is dropped off or called, you can, as a last resort, call a penalty at the end of the jam. It's late. It's not ideal, but it can be done. But that's why, as a jam ref, you can drop penalties off so it can be delivered sooner rather than later if you haven't got time to do it yourself. Moving on from there, so that's the order of which I do things then, sorry. So following your jammer, calling lead, calling jams off, points, penalties come last out of your priorities as a jammer, because you've got other refs that can do the penalties for you if you really have to. So as a jammer, that's how I prioritize things. Not everyone does stuff in that order, but that's what I believe is how the order it should be done in. But if your head ref feeds back to you, they want you to do stuff in a different way, have that they can have that conversation with you. If they don't think you're doing your role well enough, they'll give you feedback. And there's been plenty of times I've had feedback from head refs and other refs, so I can improve. And at the end of the day, part of roles as a ref in general is adjusting to your crew. But just do the best you can with those in that order. those priority order. That, in my opinion, anyway. But I'm sure someone will. I've not actually gone through the certification process, but I'm sure Jamref probably the Jamref section of certification probably teaches the order of priorities or something. But I'm happy for someone to correct me on that if they don't. From there. Oh, sorry, go on. Someone's going to say something there. No, okay. From there, talking about calling lead earlier, being one of the top priorities. When and where do you call lead? The simple way of putting it is once your jammer has passed all blockers while the jammer is upright and inbounds, and they've passed the foremost blocker as well. So that's on both teams. As soon as they pass the hips of that foremost blocker, that's when you can call lead. That's basically it. There's lots of ifs and buts to it, but I'm not going to go into that much detail about it today, because that's when you start talking about no earned passes and so on, and that's when things can get a bit more confusing. We can talk about those a bit later on if you want, but I'm not going to talk about it just now. In regards to the opposite of getting lead, you've got not lead. So if your jammer has gone to the box, or if the other jammer has got lead, then they can't get lead themselves. So you would call them not lead once they've left the engagement zone. Some people think it's once they've passed the foremost blocker as well. It's not. With not lead, it's once they've got out of the 20 foot of the engagement zone. If they haven't left the engagement zone on that pass, for example, when they go out get a penalty, they're still on the same pass. That's the reason why that is. So they don't get lead at that point, or they don't get not lead rather. So once the jammer's got lead, you need to keep pointing at them. And on the first initial pass, once you need to have your arm up above your head as well. So one hand pointing, the arm up above your head, making the L for lead. You only do that on the first initial pass up until they'll get to the back of the engagement zone again. So once they've left, you keep it up all the way around up until the rear 20 feet. To answer your question, Slay Station, no. If a jammer goes to the penalty box during a jam, they can no longer get lead, regardless of whether the other jammer's got lead or not. Where was I? So, however, with that, if they are in the box at the start of a jam, then they can potentially get lead if they start in the box. In terms of not lead, it's the whole swooping motion. I can't do that on my phone at the moment because I've only got one hand free. But you've all seen it, the sweeping motion with your hands. Where are we? Calling off a jam. Talking a bit about that. Calling off a jam, the jammer has to do multiple taps on their hips. When I say multiple, it's more than one. If they only tap their hips once, do not call the jam. They can only call it when they're lead. If they call it and then if they try to call it and they're not lead, then you shouldn't be calling it. If you're not pointing at them and they do manage to call off and the jam ref calls off the jam, it's a penalty to that jammer for basically interfering with gameplay. I know it sounds a bit harsh because it is an official's error, the one calling the jam, but if they're not pointing at them, they shouldn't even be trying it. However, if the jam ref is pointing at them and they're not actually lead, then they've been given erroneous information and they wouldn't get a penalty for that because they believe they were lead at the time. With the tapping multiple taps to hips, some jammers do the whole like head to hip thing. They don't have to do that, and the taps to the hips can be as large or as small as they like. as long as they're doing those multiple taps of the hips, completely fine. If you, and this is when I took going back to when I was talking about OPR signaling. Look, if the OPRs are tapping their helmet and you can't see the jammer calling it, you need to adjust your position so you can see them calling it. John makes a good point there. Don't get too enthusiastic about bringing your arms up too high because it can get confusing with the cut hand signal. So I keep my hands below waist height. It's a good point with the tiny hand taps. They can do it with their fingers. It's hard to see, but that's why you need to be looking for it as a priority. And the more you ref derby, or even if you play derby, Tori, you're as a jammer, you're probably you're going to be good at spotting this once you jam ref, because you're going to be used to when
making sure I was spotted as well. So
yeah, exactly. And it's going to be, once you get used to derby, or if you used to play derby, you're going to get used to knowing when jammers are going to call it. You can kind of predict a little bit more when you should be looking for it. There's going to be times when you miss it, and that's frustrating for everybody. And that's why it's one of the priorities that you need to keep an eye out for it. But if you can't see it and the OPRs are tapping it, you just need to adjust your position so you can see it. But it tends to be the higher level derby you get, the jammers do smaller hand taps, possibly with their fingers. But it's all part of gameplay at the end of the day. As long as they're doing multiple taps of the hips with those fingers, it's a legal call off, and you should be calling it as soon as possible.
On that, if say you jam ref in a game and there's maybe one particular jammer that habitually has very small call offs and you find it really hard to see, is it something you could do to maybe feed back to that skater and ask them to give more clear signal, or is that overstepping a mark?
No, you can. I wouldn't actually speak to that skater personally. I would speak to the coach, like the bench coach, and they can feed it back to that skater if they want to. The thing is, though, they don't have to do it because they're not legally obligated to do it to be able to get that call off. However, play the game to the refs at the end of the day. If the refs are being slow at calling it because you're doing tiny little hand signals, you're probably better off doing bigger hand signals. But it's down to that jammer at the end of the day. They don't have to adjust.
But that wouldn't be considered as coaching, would it?
Not necessarily. But you can. It will aid you as a jam ref, but it's not something
just
you have
state
to do.
Facts. Well, you don't have to put any opinion or thought or emotion or coaching into it. You can just state a fact. I cannot see your call off. It is small. That's not coaching. That's just fact.
Yeah, you're right. That's not telling them what to do. It's just, like you said, stating facts rather than telling them to make their call offs bigger and more visible. That, I guess, would then start stepping towards coaching.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, there's various things they can do to make that call off more spottable. They can make eye contact with you. They can tell you. There's been times when I've had jammers screeching at me to tell me they're calling it. But there's ways they can make it easier. Cecilia Ways asked a question there. Do both hips have to be tapped? The answer is yes, but I give people the benefit of the doubt. If the intention is there, and for example, they've got one of their arms is pinned up against them and they're doing it with one hand, I'll call it on that basis, because it's obvious they're trying to call it, but they just don't have hands free. And also, you're going to have people who are limb different as well. They might not necessarily have a hand. They might not be able to reach their hips. They might not have both hands. You can still play derby. I'm not going to be ableist there. If someone's kind of just tapping their sides because they can't reach their hips, I'll call that all day long. But there's obviously those are exceptions that you'd make. And if I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't expect that skater to tell me, but I would hope that the bench coaches would tell the head refs and the head NSOs during the captains meetings that we've got a jammer that is limb different and they won't be tapping their hips. But at the end of the day, we need to make those adjustments for people, and it's only fair to enable Derby to happen for people that are limb different. So I went on a bit of a tangent there about both hips have to be tapped. Moving on from there, talk a bit about losing lead. So when can a jammer lose lead? I did speak a little bit about earlier. If they've once they've earned lead, if they get a penalty, they can lose lead. If they remove their helmet cover, they can lose lead. One that a lot of people don't realise: if a teammate removes their helmet cover, they would lose lead. If an opposing player does it, that's probably going to be an expulsion for that player for gross interference. Touching someone's head's never a good thing in Derby. Intentionally, that is. I mean, it's just horribly wrong. But yeah, if an opposing player does it, they wouldn't lose lead. They wouldn't score points while the helmet cover's not on, but they can still call it. But they wouldn't lose lead for that. If it falls off during natural gameplay, so say for example, the helmet cover's elastic's not very good, and it just pings off. They don't lose lead for that either, because they've not intended it, and their teammates haven't taken it off. Again, they don't lose any. They can't score points, but they can still call the jam off, and so on. Going back to,
sorry, do they need to put the cover back on before they can call the jam?
No. If the helmet cover's fallen off, for example, if it's got caught on someone's top, or it's just pinged off because of the elastic, they can still call it off.
Yeah, cool.
But it's only if it's fallen off through natural gameplay, or if an opposing player's removed it, then they can still call it. Where was I going with that? Sorry. Sorry, I was thinking. I had a thought in my head, and it's now gone. Where are my notes? Sorry. In terms of call-offs, if a jammer has put themselves into an illegally gained position, so they're potentially cutting, if they are staying in that position, so they've gone over the apex and they've come on in front of everybody, if they then just stand there trying to call the jam off, call the cut penalty first. Don't call the jam. However, if they are seeding, as they do have the right to, and they're calling it at the same time, call the jam, because they can seed and call the jam at the same time. They're not exclusive actions at the end of the day, but they have to be making an effort to leave the track for them to be able to call it if they're in an illegally gained position. So that's it in regards to calling off a jam, losing lead. Moving on to scoring points or earning passes. As I was saying earlier, it's passing someone's hips. So passing hips. That's when they earn a pass on someone or earn a point. There's various examples of when they can earn those points outside of passing someone's hips. So, for example, if an opposing blocker is in the penalty box, you would earn their point once you pass another opposing blocker on track. So essentially you get 2 for 1 or 3 for 1 if there's 2 blockers in the box, and so on. If the jammer has gone to the penalty box and they're on a scoring pass, if an opposing blocker goes to the box and the jammer finishes their penalty before that blocker does, they earn their point once they finish serving their penalty.
Explain that one again, please.
Yeah. Okay. So jammer goes to the penalty box first. They serve 20 seconds, for example. At that point, an opposing team's blocker goes to the box. The jammer finishes their penalty. They finish their 10 seconds. Once they've done that, if they're on a scoring pass, they then earn that blocker's point.
Do they have to have already earned a point on that pass before they got the penalty?
What do you mean? Sorry.
So, Jammer on their initial pass, they score 1 point, for example. Go to the bin, and then everything is you described, and then they get that blocker in the bin's point. But what if they hadn't scored that 1 point? Do they still get that?
No, it's not like when the blocker is. You pass a blocker on track, you earn their point as soon as you leave the penalty box.
Right. I think I understand that.
Yeah, it's a difficult concept to understand unless you've got actually seeing it in person, or you've got one of those whiteboard sort of things like showing points and so on.
Yeah, to be honest, that's the thing I'm probably most hazy about that I can identify at the moment is the not on the track points, and like when a point becomes a not on the track point and when it doesn't, that's the thing that I'm a little bit fuzzy about.
Yeah, and that's one of the most difficult things to do as a jam ref. It's a practice thing, if I'm going to be honest. I can go a bit more over that though. It's a matter of just keeping an eye on who's in the box, who's off track, and so on when they're passing people. It's difficult, I'm not going to lie, but with more practice, you'll be able to start spotting those things. In regards to in regards to when jams end. Sorry, Mark's just said something. Yeah, we can talk about that now, Mark. It's not a problem. I'm going to have to go on a tangent for that. So skating out of bounds. Jammers, if they're calling the jam and they skate out of bounds while they're doing it, a lot of people complain about that because they think it should be a skating out of bounds penalty. I believe there was a clarification that if they're calling it and skating out of bounds, there's no impact there because they've not gained anything. So it wouldn't be a penalty. I'm 99% certain on that. So I think that's what you're saying there. So they didn't get points. So no advantage was gained. So you don't call it. And I believe that's how it is, basically. So if they're skating out of bounds, as long as they're calling at the same time of doing it, there's no penalty there. But I'd need to just get clarification of that because I can't remember where in the rules that is off the top of my head, if I'm going to be honest.
That's come up recently on the rules clarification group. I remember it the same as you do. There's no advantage once the whistles have started, so it's
exactly it. Yeah, I just can't remember where in the rules is. Does that answer your question though, then, Mark? Yeah, in regards to Invader Sin, yeah, if they skate out of bounds before they start calling off the jam, yeah, that's a skating out of bounds penalty all day long. So yeah, completely agree with that, but they have to start calling it before they start skating out of bounds, basically. So I think that answers your question, though. If you've got any follow-up questions on that, do let me know, because just want to make sure I have answered that for you there. Going back to scoring points. Sorry, just picking up where I left off. Okay, I'm going to ask a question now. Can a jammer score points while they're down?
No.
Most of the time, I'd agree with you. Yes, there is one eventuality that they can get points or passes while they're down. Basically, if a jammer is down on track and an opposing blocker skates back past them, they earn that point or pass.
Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah. It sounds massively counterintuitive, but it's the only time. Sorry, yes, once they've stood up, you are correct. It's the only time that they can get that point for someone when they're down, essentially.
It's why I'd get upset with my skaters that I coach if they hit the jammer down and run back. It's like, no, they're down, not out. You've just given them your points.
If you're going to start running people back, you need to make sure the jammer's off track.
Exactly. So this only applies when the jammer is down but fully within the skating boundaries, and the blocker then goes behind them, who hadn't been already awarded a point off that skater. If they then put themselves in a position behind the jammer, then they're basically giving that point away.
Yes, essentially so, yeah. As Invader Sin says, once they stand up, they earn that point or pass. So in a way, that also applies to them getting lead as well. So if, say, we can use red and black for an example. Red jammer gets hit down by the rearmost black blocker, but they stay on track when they go down. All the black blockers skate backwards past them. They're now in front of everybody. The moment that jammer stands up, if the other jammer hasn't got lead, that jammer then becomes lead. Going back to scoring points and earning passes, at the end of a jam, if a blocker has come on behind them, so they were in the penalty box and they come on behind a jammer, or if they were out of play at the front of the pack, that jammer would get their point at the end of a jam. So before you award your points, you need to be looking around to see where the blockers have come in, where the blockers are positioned at the front of the pack. You can perhaps check with your front IPR to see if they were out of play at the end of the jam, because then they get those points as well. Speaking of end of jams, what are your priorities at the end of a jam? Firstly, checking what points you should be giving. Once you're 100% sure of the points you should be given, hold up your hands to indicate your points. When I say you need to be 100% sure, if you're not sure, you can check with your OPRs, IPRs, see if they passed anyone you've not spotted. Around the outside of the pack, sometimes you can't see who they've passed. It's completely fine to check with your OPRs to see if I sometimes go over to them and say, I think they passed 2 skaters before they went out or before the jam ended. Can you just let me know? And they'll confirm with you if they've seen it. Great. And that's a really useful skill for an OPR to have. I tend to hold up my points for a minimum of 10 seconds. So both teams can see it. The scoreboard can see it. The announcers, crowd. Some jam refs hold it up for a bit longer. Some hold it up until there's 10 seconds left to go until the next jam. But it's a minimum of 10 seconds, in my opinion. If you believe there's been a mistake in that jam, that you need to check to make sure the right amount of points have gone up onto the scoreboard. If you believe there's been a mistake there and you need to go over to the scoreboard to correct that, tell your head ref, tell the jam timer that you're going to go over to the scoreboard, because the jam can't start if there's only one jam ref at the end of the day. And you can correct those points at that point. And that sort of thing can and should be prevented by having that communication before the game starts with your scorekeeper. But it's not always perfect. Sometimes you still have to correct your points, and that's completely fine if you do, as long as you do it before the start of the next jam. At the end of a game, again, check your points are correct. You can correct up to the last 2 jams, if I remember correctly. Someone please correct me. Mark, you're a fantastic NSO. You can probably correct me on that. But I believe it's the last 2 jams you can correct points on. End of the following jam. Thank you.
Beard, can I ask a question going back to just the general calling off a jam before we get to end of a game?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Just as a general rule, how long do you keep your eye on your jammer once the jam is called? looking out for like any sort of like late contact or anything like that? Like, is it just do you get a feel for it? Do you have like a general, 3 or 4 seconds kind of thing?
It's a judgment call at the end of the day. If they're out in the open,
sorry, I was just going to say,
in the open, you generally don't have to. But if they're in the middle of the pack,
yeah,
I would keep my eye on them until they're safe. Basically, when I say safe, I mean them not hitting anyone and no one hitting them, and there's not much potential of that, so everything's stopped. Basically,
yeah, I think I've been in my very early reffing days been called out by immediately turning to my scorekeeper to award points, and then flagged by the bench coach that I missed a late hit because I wasn't looking at my jammer. What happened?
Yeah, and that's a perfectly valid point by that bench coach. But at the same time, there are other refs there, but you're a jam ref. You should be keeping an eye on your jammer in that sort of situation until they are safe, as it were.
Thank you.
No, it's okay. And that's about it, really. Give it a go, jam reffing. As I was talking about with Lee earlier, it's a position that I believe that all rookie referees should start out doing, because there's pressure on the jam refs because they are like the center of attention and points win games at the end of the day. But you've got that more focus there, that you are focusing on that one person, what's happening to them, what they're doing. So that's about it, really. I will type up my notes a bit more properly, because I've made notes all over them, and then I'll share them in a post some point soon. Does anyone have questions, things they want to talk about? Go for it, Lee.
Overtime jams.
Okay, yep, overtime jams. Don't happen often in Derby, but they do happen.
More often than they used to.
Yes, this is true. Because there's less points in Derby than there used to be. Overtime jams. Basically, you start scoring points straight away, and there's no call-offs.
There's no lead either. There's no call-off.
Yeah. You just start scoring points from the first block of your pass, and then
to make sure your scorekeeper's aware that you're going to throw up 4 fingers pretty much instantaneously. Yeah,
as soon as your jammer's left the engagement zone, that's when you give your points. So yeah. And you'll do that on the first pass and any subsequent passes as well. But that's only for overtime jams, and as I say, they don't happen too often. Any other questions or things people wanted to talk about in regards to jam reffing or anything else, really?
Yeah, timing of when to drop off points. Is it always after the engagement zone?
Yeah, it's either once the jammer's left the engagement zone or at the end of a jam. So if your jammer's gone to the box and they've earned 2 points, you don't give those points until either the end of a jam or if they get out of the box and then leave the engagement zone.
I've got a hint regarding dropping off of points, and that is, just because you've thrown up the fingers doesn't mean you have to crane your neck to stare at your scorekeeper. Look at the scorekeeper just as you go past them. Make the eyes, but that's it. Just a glance, just a check, just a nod. You don't have to throw up your fingers and then immediately turn your head, because we all know what happens when jammers get out the front of the pack after scoring 4 points. They're going to call the jam.
Yeah.
So it's super duper important when you throw up those points, keep watching your jammer. Keep watching. And when you pass the score table, that's when you'll look up at your scorekeeper. Does that make sense?
I don't even necessarily do it as I pass the score table.
Yeah.
I might do it when I'm going to. I tend to do it when I'm going down a straight and I'm looking at my jammer and the score table at the same time. And I throw the pans up, wait for my scorekeeper to repeat what I'm doing, give them a short nod so they know I've seen it, that they've got them correct. Get on with my day, keep following my jammer with my eyes on them.
Yeah, trust your scorekeepers. You don't have to crane your neck. You don't have to stare at them.
Yeah, and you shouldn't be taking your eyes off your jammer anyway.
Yeah,
that's a really good point, Lee. Anything else for anyone?
not about jam reffing as such. Does anybody know if there's any scrims anytime soon on a Sunday during the day so I can practice it?
On a Sunday.
In England, what kind of range are we talking?
Anywhere. I'm in Wrexham.
Yes. Nottingham does routine Sunday scrims.
What time?
Midday-ish, 1 o'clock-ish.
Let me check how far that is travel-wise, and I'll see if I can.
I don't know if there's any coming up now because it's kind of off-season-ish, but absolutely, yeah. I'll start advertising again.
Yeah, I know Rainey in Manchester have Sunday scrims. They're not. I don't know. Swearwolf will probably be able to tell you when they are more than I will.
Sorry.
I
There's just
believe
the thing with kids. It's a nightmare trying to get somewhere where I can practice what I want to do, because we only do really short scrimmage times in sessions on Wednesdays, and it's driving me insane because I want to practice and I can't improve without practice. And at the moment I can't practice that much.
As far as raining goes, again, we're all coming up to off season, so it's probably going to be something that'll be popping up again in the new year. Probably from mid-January we'll start getting back on track. So we'll just put some information out there. Yeah,
you've got Manchester Roller Derby.
Manchester, Arcadia. I don't know when Arcadia's
Arcadia. Chris is saying about where all up their monthly
probably all closer to Wrexham than Nottingham is.
Yeah.
I'm Arcadia. We scrimmage on a Saturday once a month, and you'd be more than welcome. We're especially welcoming to new reps. We're really, really casual at our Saturday scrimmages, but it is on a Saturday rather than a Sunday, which I know you were after. You'd always.
No, I'd love to come and join you, Tori. But yeah, it's the kid. So.
Yeah,
Sunday's good because Nottingham Hellfire Harlots practice on a Sunday, and then immediately afterwards Emo RD practice. So you've got basically two. I think even Nottingham. I think it's literally 3 leagues practicing in the same area on the same day. But yeah, we can talk.
Okay.
Yeah,
I know it's a bit of a trek.
Yeah, you've got Rainey. You've got Manchester Roller Derby as well on Sundays. We'll do their monthly-ish, according to Chris, on Sundays as well. So that's not too far from North Wales. Yeah, that's as far as I know anyway, and what everyone else has been doing. No, it's okay. I finished talking about jam reffing, to be honest. There's it's to practice it, jam reffing, but other than what I've said, just practice as any rule, as any ref role. You'll get better at it the more you practice it.
Yeah.
Did you? I had to ring off. Did you cover not on the track points and whatnot? I mean, clearly you must have.
Yes, but
I'd love to cover not on track points in more detail if you've got time.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it without the magnetic whiteboard type thing.
Yeah, well, I've got a hint that I was taught at the Woofter officiating clinic millions of years ago.
Go for it.
Which has always worked for me, and it's on the same theme of keeping your eyes on your jammer, but just looking up at your scorekeeper when you go past or when you're on the straight. Same applies for me for the penalty box. So when I skate past the penalty box, I'll glance up, look at how many enemy blockers are there, and then I'll start chanting. If there's one enemy blocker in the box, I'll start chanting. 1 gets me 2. 1 gets me 2, because that means the first blocker I pass, I'm going to get 2 points. Or if there's 2 blockers, 1 gets me 3. 1 gets me 3. Or if there's 3 blockers, 1 stood up, 1 gets me 4. Although it's pretty obvious in that case. So it helped me to remember. And then after that, I don't think about it. I don't think about box points. I don't think about the box. I don't think about who's behind me. I don't need to worry about any of that. All I know is 1 hips gets me 2 points. 1 hips gets me 3 points. And that was something that was passed down for me from the Woofter Clinic millions of years ago. That's really helped me.
That's about as much as I can do with not on the track points. If they're sat in the bin or they're in the penalty box, sat or standing, it's
99% of the time that's enough.
That I struggle with.
It's when they're what? Sorry.
When they're in between, between getting issued a penalty and actually getting to the bin, I think that's where I'm going to more struggle to spot that.
Yeah.
But
the checklist for that is if you get out the front of the pack, you will have got 4 points. Unless the jam ends, in which case you're going to look at the penalty box like Dan told you already. So in a way, you don't have to worry about it too hard, because you're either going to get 4 points and come out the front, or 99% of the time, or the jam's going to end and you're going to have time to look at the box.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's a good point. And I guess he can clock as well if there's a no-earned pass along the way as well. So
Yeah. So that's the other thing to worry. You don't need to worry about it because you're going to get. It's always going to be 4, right? It's always going to be 4 points unless the jam ends in the middle of the pack. So you don't need to worry particularly hard about much of it. I mean, I try not to because I've got a very small brain. It's always going to be 4 points, and if the jam ends, then you use whatever mnemonics you need, or use whatever time you need to look around and figure out where are the other blockers. Why haven't I got 4 points?
Yeah, and generally, if you're waiting to award points at the end, you might get one of the other referees going, "Oh, I've just given that at the end of a jam."
Oh, yeah.
One of the other referees might come up to you and say, "Oh, I've given that skater a penalty. Had they passed them?"
Or I guarantee the bench coach has noticed, and they'll be running up to you.
Telling you that skater's gone to the box. Did they earn their point?
You only notice when you don't give one.
Yeah. So communicate with your other referees at the end of the day, because if you're not sure if a skater's got a penalty before the jam ends, they'll tell you, or you can ask them. And then you can award their point if they haven't earned it already.
And some other hints that I was taught millions of years ago, which might help. And it's only really relevant if, for example, you're in the middle of the pack and your jammer gets a penalty, and now you've got to remember, oh crap, who have I passed already? Right? So I was taught to mark off mentally who you've collected. And I think about it like Pokemon. Oh, I've collected the pivot. Oh, I've collected purple helmet. And then once you've passed 2, think about who you need. Oh, I need yellow helmet. I need grey helmet. And then you can just keep those bite-sized bits of information. If you go to the box, you're like, right. All I need is grey helmet and the pivot. And then you don't have to worry too hard about. I mean, you might get it wrong, and that happens frequently. And when it does, make it up. That's what I do.
No, Lee, don't make it up.
Don't admit that.
We're all friends here.
I mean, they're skills that I've got as a jammer as well. To be honest, I use the exact same methodology for knowing which points I needed.
Who have I collected, and who do I need to collect for the set?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I
once
use
you get
that
more
already as
experience,
a jam ref. I'll stay in my head like just need pivots, and then you're just looking for that pass there.
Once you get more experience as well, you don't necessarily have to. You can start thinking about in terms of skater numbers as well.
Yeah,
and that you will often get bench coaches coming up to you and going, "Oh, why did they only get 2 points?" And you can go, "Well, they passed black 20 and black 40, but they didn't pass black 111 and black 5." For example,
I'm so dyscalculate.
And if you can say that with confidence,
for me.
then that bench coach won't
like,
question you again.
With the purple helmet, I don't know the number.
Yeah. and that's completely fine. You can use that logic as well, but it sounds jam reffing. A lot of it is about sounding confident when bench coaches ask you questions. If you sound confident enough of why you've given those points, they'll just go, "Oh, okay, fine."
Yeah.
Because if you start umming and ahhing about stuff, they might call official reviews. They might talk to the head ref about you not being confident in what you're doing. You're not giving the right points and so on. And that's not ideal. So fake it until you make it.
They'll tell on Woofter. Strongly worded letters.
Yeah. And so on. Anything else anyone wants to talk about, though, in terms of jam from or any other areas while you've got me and other refs that are here?
That's a point.
Those that are vastly experienced.
Sorry, Tori, you all right?
You speak.
I was just wondering, I know obviously you all start off like refs is just like you start off nothing and you work your way up and you learn and all that. Is there anything official, like to get certificates or to be so people actually recognise that you are a ref and that you are training, that you know what you're doing?
Yeah, on the WFTDA website, well, not on the actual official site. There's an learning LMS type thing, part of the WFTDA, where you can go through a certification process where there's online courses that you can take. I believe someone correct me if I'm wrong, but you can do. Oh, sorry, what?
Does your league need to be involved with it?
No, you can do that completely independently.
I just thought things about
make them pay for it.
Lee, wait. I believe the first level that you go through, you don't have to pay. From what I remember, level 1 you don't have to pay. It's only if you level 2 or above you have to pay $30, I think.
I had to pay for the
certification myself, so I can't remember.
Changed it.
To be honest.
It used to be paid for level 1 at least then. So
yeah, I mean, someone corrects me on that. I can't remember because I haven't gone through certification myself. To be honest,
so I have, and certification means you do some learning courses on the website, which cost or used to cost some dollars. But then you need to pass a test, and then you need peer reviews. You need to go and find people who you need to find a captain of a team. You need to find an official. You need to find a little like a cross section of people who are going to have to write forms. Now, we're not very good at this because we're British, right? So you have to find people who are willing to go and spend lots of time writing a form to WFTDA, telling them how great you are.
Okay. I'm going to correct you there. You don't have to have those. It's just more helpful if you do.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to figure out. I didn't know that I needed like the certification to say that I can roll
anymore. Surely you need the OOSs.
You don't have to have them.
You're not going to get certified without an OOS.
You can. You don't have to have them, Lee. It's helpful because you can, especially if you're applying for the higher levels, the OOSs, can't remember what OOS stands for.
Overview of officiating skills.
Thank you. Basically, it's like a reference.
Lauren.
Yeah, Tori.
Lauren.
Yeah. Someone is sharing.
I'm just starting out, and I haven't thought about any of this yet. I'm just getting experience doing scrimmages. I'm doing the World one this weekend. Which
okay. Thanks, Invader Finn. Yeah, they've got the answer there. Apparently, you do have to have the OOSs for level 1 and above. Thank you.
I accept your apology.
I do apologise, Lee.
I will say this. I will not be pursuing certification. I don't think I'm going to miss it. I don't think there's so much roller derby going on right now that I don't think realistically it will affect your chances into getting into games and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially with the
what matters is getting your name out there. Yeah. What matters is becoming known on the circuit.
Yeah.
And peer reviews, basically peer networks, in my opinion. Now, it's nice to have it, and the patch is nice, and I guess it matters if you're going to be going somewhere where that you're not known. But in general, there are lots and lots and lots of fantastic officials, beard included, who are known throughout Europe, who do not have certification and still manage to get into high-level tournaments and whatnot. So think about why you might want to pursue it. I think it's nice to test yourself always, but when I started out, I was like, I have to do it, because I thought that was my route into getting stuff. And then after N years, it's not the route into getting stuff. The route into getting places is getting out there, practicing, visiting people, traveling, getting your name out there, knowing people, working with as many people and teams and leagues as you can.
Yeah. And Invader Sin makes a good point there. Building your official resume or CV, as it's known, the officiating history guide. I can't remember the official words for it. Officiating history, I think is the correct word. So. Something like that. But yeah, building up that CV, ref CV, people know, mostly common know it as. So you've got that record of what games you've done.
Yeah.
Will help as well.
Genuinely, like, I've played Derby for years, but I had no clue like what was expected with reffing, and obviously there's no refs in my league, so I've got no one to ask questions to or to look up to or to know where to fucking go. So that's why they pound you with too many questions. It's just because I've got no one else to ask.
It's all good. Well, me and VK are now in the North Wales group.
I know, I'm so happy.
So if you need to ask questions in there, feel free to, or if Mark says a good point, no stupid questions. If you're thinking them, someone else probably is as well. But
I mean, UK refs was the hotbed.
If you ever want to shoot us a message privately because you don't want to ask it in public, that's fine as well. If I can't answer straight away, I won't, but I will come back to you eventually.
Thank you.
But if you want to put it in public so the whole of North Wales roller derby can see the questions, you're probably not the only one thinking it, if I'm going to be honest.
I mean, UK refs used to be it, right? Their Facebook group. Now, I know Facebook's not cool anymore, but it's that group's, it's a very quiet, dusty town with the occasional begging advert. But it used to be a hotbed of questions and scenarios. And I mean, in fact, KO's group has essentially supplanted it at this point. But yeah, because you're right. I mean, there are unspoken rules and routes and stuff that nobody talks about. And I guess we used to talk about it it's just oral history, isn't it? An oral tradition.
Yeah. Another good group as well are in the rule clarifications and tough questions on Facebook. That's a really good group just for general rules questions.
It's all a bunch of nerds answering questions about Derby.
Thank you.
It's my morning read every morning. That's like instead of my newspaper, I just look through that group.
No, it is a really good group. That's probably the one my go-to group for asking and answering questions.
What's that? Real clarifications on what?
Roller derby rules, qualifications, and tough questions, I think it's called.
Thank you.
If you can't find it, I'll send me a message on Facebook and I'll get you added to it.
Thank you.
But yeah, that's easily, and it's not just refs in there; it's skaters as well. And it will. Oh, somebody's copied and pasted it. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
So there you go. There's the link to it. Sometimes it will descend into arguments between referees and NSOs that aren't agreeing with each other. And in that sort of situation, it's often, if the rules aren't clear, it will be down to what is the consensus on a rule. If I'm going to be honest,
down to Daniel
yeah. Yeah. There's a referee called Daniel Alt, an American, I believe he's American, who's, I believe, also on the rules committee, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's, thank you, Mark. I've met him once when I was in the States. Really nice guy, massively knowledgeable, bit dry at times, as Mark will probably say, but he's also got a wicked sense of humour. But he's a massively knowledgeable guy, really fantastic. And he often is the one that comes in and gives a definitive answer, quoting the rules everywhere. But like everyone else, there's times when I've seen him admit that he's wrong, and he will. And that's what a sign of a brilliant referee, admitting when you're wrong and learning, because we're all here learning. None of us are perfect. Just keep learning and keep improving, and don't compare yourself to other people. Just
I'm wrong 90%
how
of
were
the
you
time.
doing last week? Are you better than you were last week? Great. If not, what do you need to do to get better? Yeah, exactly. No one's ever officiated a perfect game. We'll have a perfect game when the skaters do. Sorry, tangent there. Anyone else for anything else?
Can I see people's points hands for inspiration, please?
Okay, right.
I'm a bit
so
short-sighted myself, and I don't like to wear my glasses unless I absolutely have to, because stuff. So is there any particularly clear hand signals that me and my scorekeeper can talk about to make that as easy as possible?
Yeah, okay. My hand signals, and we'll talk a bit more about making them clearer as well. My hand signals: none, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ways of making those clearer is having little things on your fingertips. I think Swearwolves have got things that they put on their fingertips when they're NSOing. I think you've put.
No.
Do you not?
No,
okay.
I don't. I do have tiny little fingers, though, and when I'm jam reffing, it's very difficult to make that clear. But yeah, just changing the position of, as you say, using the thumb for 3 because it makes a marked difference between 2 and 4.
Yeah, exactly.
I see. I do see that some people put like colored marks on their fingertips just to show that finger is being used.
Yeah. No initial pass signal. There's no official one on that. I do that twisty fist. Some people do like the goose or
the duck of no.
Yeah, the duck of no. Some people do it really high up and do it like a giraffe. But
Is that when did you say that's when they didn't get out of their initial trip? Yeah. So no points.
Mark make a good point there. Some people do that for 2 points.
Cool.
But at the end of the day, that's one of the reasons why you speak to your scorekeeper before the game starts. So you can be clear over what points you're going to be giving, and so they know what to look out for. And
I always use it as a chance if your
scorekeeper is as well. But do whatever's comfortable for your hands, because not everyone has fully flexible hands. Some people have arthritis in their fingers. I'm not going to judge for that. Do what's comfortable for you and what's identifiable to your scorekeeper, so they know what points you've given.
It's more me being sure that the scorekeeper's giving the right one back to me. So is it okay to request that they give certain signals? Yeah, that's fine. That's why you have that conversation with them before the game starts.
And remember, it's always 4 unless it's the end of the jam, and then you've got some time to skate up to them and just check.
Well, it's not always 4, because sometimes you've got no end passes, Lee.
99% of the time it's 4, and then you can skate. Right, well, yes. But
are you sure you're spotting these no end passes, Lee?
Yes. Make sure when you're talking to your scorekeeper
things on their fingertips. Sometimes you have black tape around your fingertips when lighting's difficult, or if you've got orangey or brownie coloured walls, your skin's going to blend into them a bit as a scorekeeper, unfortunately. So it is really useful to have something on your fingertips so the jam ref can see what you're holding up.
Oh, thanks.
That's okay. No one passes, Alice. They can be difficult to spot, if I'm going to be honest. But that's where you've got several referees that you can help you out with spotting them, if I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to go into no one passes now because it's getting on to nearly 8:45. But something someone else can go through another time, or if someone wants to go through it now, because my brain's starting to go to mush. Does anyone else have any questions or anything on anything else at all, though, or jam reffing or whatever?
One thing I've started doing recently, and I'm currently on I think 11 game of not following the wrong jammer streak. So, since I started doing this, at the start of every single jam, from the first jam to the last one, I will say to the other jam ref, "You are black, I am white." Every single jam. And since I've started doing that, I haven't followed the wrong jammer once. And the one jam that I didn't do it, I followed the wrong jammer. So I think it's just a helpful tip for people.
And the way I do it myself, that's a perfectly valid way of doing it. I'm not going to say it's not. The way I do it myself is where I hold up my wrist with the identifier on, and I'm looking at my wrist while making eye contact with the jammer, so I can see what colour I am.
Yeah,
that's one way of doing it. Your way's perfectly valid as well, though.
Yeah, but I often get confused looks the first few times I do it, and then the last few times, because it's like, wait, you're still doing that? Like, we're 3 jams from the end of the game. But
no, it's your way of remembering which colour you're following at the end of the day. You're not necessarily doing it for their benefit. You're doing it for yours.
You're dedicated to excellence, and I applaud you.
Yeah, and if you follow the wrong jammer, it's not benefiting them, is it? So if you're doing whatever you can to follow the right jammer, as long as you're not coaching anyone, completely fine. Anything else for anyone, though?
Oh, this has been great, though. I'm keen to go. I haven't had my tea yet, so I just wanted to say thank you.
No, you're welcome. We'll call it a day there then, I think. Kia, you okay to share it once it's all been recorded properly and upload it and stuff? Cool, thank you. If anyone ever has any questions, please do send me a message on either on here or on Facebook if we're friends on there. I'll type up my notes properly tomorrow and then share them with everybody so you can just see a bit more about what I've rambled on about, though.
One more shot of the dogs.
One is there.
Yay!
and the other one's gone upstairs. So
brilliant. Thanks so much, Beard.
No, you're welcome. And I'll speak to everyone soon.
Thank you so much for a good session.